In this video, we're going to discuss administrative distance, or AD. Routers use AD when there are multiple sources of information about remote networks. It helps them determine which source is most trustworthy and which routing protocol or source will actually populate the routing table. Now, remember that different routers use different factors to determine the best path to a network number. Here, we have a simple network with 3 routers, and we're going to focus on the segment on the bottom. I'm going to label it Network X. And we also have RIP, Routing Information Protocol, and OSPF, Open Shortest Path First Protocol, using different metrics to determine the best path. From Router 1's perspective, we learned that RIP would always prefer this path to get to Network X because there's only 1 hop to the next network. The other connection would require 2 hops. While RIP values hop counts, OSPF values bandwidth. In this scenario, OSPF would actually prefer the long way around to get to Network X because of the faster connection speed. There are 200 megabit per second links, which actually results in a lower metric than if I had used the slower 10 megabit per second link. So let's say that you have both RIP and OSPF active on each of these 3 devices. If RIP prefers this path, but OSPF prefers this path, Router 1 has to make a choice. RIP is saying, hey, I think we should send all the traffic down this path to get to Network X. OSPF says, I have a better idea. Let's send all the data around this faster path because of the better bandwidth. Which information does Router 1 actually trust? That's where administrative distance comes in handy. Sources of information, such as routing protocols, have default AD values associated with them. If I have multiple sources of information feeding me data, I trust the one with the lowest AD. A directly connected route is always the most trustworthy source of information, so this means that 2 types of ports will always give us the lowest AD, an Ethernet port and a wide area network, or WAN port. Both will have an AD of 0. That's the most trusted value. A statically defined route is the next lowest. Those have an AD of 1. Because you need to enter a static route manually, the router assumes that if you took the time to type it in, then it must be trustworthy. What about the routing protocols? Each protocol has a default starting value that you can override depending on your network needs. Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol, EIGRP, is set at 90 by default. OSPF defaults to 110. RIP has a default value of 120. The highest AD value you'll ever see is 255, which is considered unusable. Knowing this, let's look at our example again. Router 1 is getting information from both RIP and OSPF. Which one is it going to trust? Since OSPF is 110 and the RIP value is 120, OSPF is considered the more trustworthy source. For this reason, the OSPF route is inserted into Router 1's routing table, but the RIP route is not. All traffic intended for Network X will follow the pathway set by OSPF. If OSPF weren't running, then obviously the RIP route would be installed in the routing table instead. That's it for this video. We talked about how administrative distance determines the trustworthiness of a particular routing source. We also discussed how administrative distance values are used to determine which route will populate the routing table.